where we take the world's best research and distill it down so you can be instantly well-informed. Today, we are cracking open the science of communication, and we're drawing specifically from research taught in this. Well, it's an incredibly popular, award-winning course at Harvard Business School. And we're not just talking about, how to give a great presentation. We are zooming right in on those tiny micro decisions that shape every single interaction you have.
Oh, every single one.
From your morning coffee to a really difficult conversation with your partner.
And let's just, start by establishing the gravity of this. The stakes are really high. If you commit to making even small positive shifts in the way you approach conversations, everything in your life stands to get better.
I think that's a big promise.
It is, but this is not hyperbole. We're talking about, real tangible improvements in your love life, your relationships with your kids, your ability to work with colleagues, and crucially, just your overall sense of professional efficacy, your confidence.
That is a massive claim. But I guess when you break down the fundamental architecture of human connection, it actually makes perfect sense structurally. Every single relationship you have, right? Personal, professional, it's fundamentally defined as a repeated sequence of conversations over time?
Exactly. The repeated sequence. We are just creatures of habit. So if you can introduce a little bit of positive friction.
Friction, huh? What do you mean by that?
Well, just a better question. A moment of intentional humor. Even just a second of genuine listening where you might normally tune out. That tiny shift, it compounds over weeks and months and years. And it turns into these massive life improvements.
Right. So you're not just spinning your wheels or avoiding conflict.
You're building relationships that have serious forward momentum. You're actually getting somewhere together.
So the goal here isn't just about, avoiding the big blow-ups or those awful, I wish I hadn't said that moments of regret.
No, it's much more proactive than that.
It's about consciously designing those micro moments to actually move the relationship forward.
Precisely. And what does that better momentum actually buy you? In the social marketplace or the professional one, it translates directly to gaining and maintaining higher status.
Okay, let's unpack that word, status, because for a lot of people, that word can sound really cold or, corporate.
It can. But status, in this context, is incredibly concrete.
Yeah.
And actually very warm. We're not talking about job titles or, how much money you have.
So what is it then?
It's the collective evaluation others have of you. It's a mix of likability, respect, power, and influence. The youth today, I think, they summarize it with the term riz, right? That kind of inherent charismatic quality that just draws people in.
So when you communicate effectively and kindly, you earn that respect.
You're admired by your peers, you're listened to. And that ability to influence and be heard, that is just paramount to success in any domain, at home or at work.
The source material we're digging into today comes from a course created by Professor Alison Woodbrooks at HBS. And the title is, it's interesting, it's Talk, How to Talk Gooder in Business and Life.
Gooder, yes.
And that intentional grammatical mistake. That's our first clue, isn't it? It tells us something about the philosophy here.
It signals a really critical balance. The whole framework is designed to balance gravity and levity.
Seriousness and play.
Exactly. You need the seriousness, the substance, that's the gravity. But without a spirit of play and fun, the levity conversations just become boring. They get rigid and, ultimately they're not sustainable. And what's more, that word is rooted in good. The goal isn't just to be persuasive or effective. It's rooted in this constant effort to be a good person. And hopefully just a little bit.
A little bit gooder.
A little bit gooder through how you talk to people.
I really appreciate that emphasis because conversations can feel so overwhelming. It's like this complex ocean of possibility.
It is.
You're making hundreds of these tiny continuous decisions. What topic should I bring up? What should I ask? Is it okay to laugh now? Should I share something personal? It's a huge cognitive load.
It's an immense cognitive load.
Yeah.
And that is precisely why we need a simple, reliable framework.
A mental shortcut.
Exactly. When you're under pressure, you don't have time to process all that complexity. You need a shortcut.
And that shortcut, that 4-part framework, is the acronym TALK.
Right. Which breaks down into T topics. A is for asking.
L
is for levity.
And K?
K is for kindness.
Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of our time unpacking T, A, L, and K. But before we do that, we can't really start a conversation about communication without addressing the single biggest psychological barrier, the thing that undermines almost all of our attempts to connect.
You have to face the dragon first.
The dragon.
Yes. And the primary reason most of us struggle to communicate effectively, even with the absolute best intentions, is just fundamental human nature. It's egocentrism. Self-centeredness.
And our brains are, they're biologically wired this way, aren't they? It's a survival mechanism kicking in.
100%. For millennia, our brains were just obsessively focused on self-preservation. What is my perspective? What are my needs? How do I make sure I'm safe? And that self-focus is critical for survival, but it actively prevents genuine connection. When you walk into a dialogue in that default mode, what's in this for me? How do I sound smart?
How do I avoid looking stupid?
But yes, you immediately compromise the quality of the co-constructed conversation you're about to attempt.
And this leads right into the research that defines conversations not as a simple exchange, but as a coordination game. And this feels like a really crucial concept we need to fully unpack.
It's central. The coordination game insight is central to understanding why conversations feel so stressful. Think of a coordination game as any situation where two or more people have to make decisions that depend on each other, but without perfect information about what the other side is going to do.
Like the game of chicken.
The game of chicken is the classic life or death example. You're making a choice based only on what you think the other person will do.
And a conversation is just like that, but with a tiny, rapid-fire decisions.
It is a relentless, non-stop series of those decisions. At any given second, we're coordinating on it. What's the topic right now? Should I interrupt? How deep should I go with this personal story? Am I laughing too loud? Am I being too serious?
Wow.
All of these tiny subconscious decisions create that immense cognitive load we were talking about.
And the most common failure in this constant coordination game is what they call perspective-taking failure.
That failure, the inability to step outside your own head and accurately understand the other person's mind, their intentions, is cited as the single greatest barrier to connection and conflict resolution.
Because of that egocentrism we just talked about.
Exactly. We rely on our own beliefs, our own feelings, our own assumptions to guess how the other person is feeling or what they meant. And the overwhelming psychological evidence shows we are really bad at making those guesses. We just project.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the core insight here is that getting better at communication isn't just about crafting witty remarks or using a better vocabulary.
No, not at all.
It's about consciously overriding that default egocentric wiring and choosing to connect instead.
Absolutely. The moment you shift your mindset from how do I perform to how do we connect and build something together, everything changes. You have to remember, dialogue is co-constructed.
Co-construct.
You and the other person are building a temporary structure together.
Yep.
It's not a monologue. It's a shared creative act.
Okay, so with that foundational shift established, let's move into the first element of the talk framework. T is for topics. How do we use the structure of topics to our advantage?
Well, topics are the segments our brain naturally uses to organize and retrieve memories. If I asked you tomorrow, hey, what did we talk about? You wouldn't recall every single sentence.
Oh, of course not.
You'd recall the segments. You'd say, oh, we talked about status, and then we talked about that coordination game thing.
Right.
So since our brains are already wired to organize this way, we can use that organizational ability consciously to steer the conversation away from boring defaults.
And this brings us to that famous anecdote from the course about preparation. It's almost embarrassing how much effort we put into the superficial parts of meeting someone compared to the actual content.
It's completely unbalanced, isn't it? Imagine you're prepping for a first date. You'll spend hours on your outfit, your makeup, getting the perfect reservation, maybe checking their social media.
Right, all the external stuff.
But the research says less than 10% of people spend even 5 minutes thinking about what they will actually talk about. They leave the most important element, the content of the connection, totally to chance.
And the research offers a shockingly low bar for improving this. It's called the 30-second fix.
Yes. The data indicates that spending just 30 seconds, that's it, brainstorming 3 to 5 potential topics ahead of time significantly improves the quality of the conversation.
For both people.
For both people. The benefits are measurable, lower anxiety, greater perceived fluency, and just higher enjoyment for everyone involved.
And what's so interesting is that you don't even have to use those topics for the preparation to pay off.
Right.
The mere act of having them ready creates a sense of confidence.
It acts as an anchor. When the conversation stalls or a topic just dies, instead of panicking, you have 3 alternative launch codes ready in your mental back pocket.
So you're more likely to switch topics.
Much more likely, which just increases the odds of landing on something that is genuinely mutually interesting.
But why is there such a strong aversion to planning? Especially with people we see every day, our spouses, our parents. We feel like we shouldn't need to plan what to talk about.
That aversion comes from a really romanticized idea of spontaneous connection. We feel that if we have to plan, the relationship isn't natural enough.
Right.
But that mindset is the enemy of deepening connection. It results in that conversational rut of default small talk. How was work? Did you take out the trash? What's on TV?
The checklist conversation.
It's the checklist. Those are the easy, low-effort topics, but they starve the relationship of novelty and engagement.
And this is actually a fantastic tool for introverts or shy people who often struggle the most with that cognitive load.
Oh, absolutely. For anyone who has social anxiety, the panic often centers on that fear of silence or the fear of not being able to generate content quickly.
Topic prep takes that away.
It alleviates that immediately. It gives you a reliable arsenal. Once introverts try this, they realize how much pressure they've been putting on themselves to be spontaneous when preparation is just a far more effective strategy.
Let's get specific. How do we use topics to shift from that kind of managerial talk to meaningful talk with people we interact with all the time? Let's start with family.
Okay, take the example of talking to your child. Instead of defaulting to supervision or checklists, did you practice? Remember your trumpet. You shift the focus from the task to their internal experience.
So what would you ask?
You ask, what are you looking forward to in band today? Or what's the hardest part of practice for you, and how does that make you feel about your instrument?
You're trying to get at the underlying emotion or the challenge, not just reviewing the checklist.
Exactly. You're showing interest in their life as they experience it, not just their compliance with your expectations.
And with colleagues.
Similarly, with colleagues, instead of just saying, how's the project? You zero in on their lived reality. If they just had a new baby, you ask about the trauma, the joy. How are you actually managing the sleep deprivation? What has been the biggest surprise so far?
You're showing them that you notice and care about the high-stakes things happening in their life beyond the meeting room.
Yes. And this is where we can use this spectacular modern tool, the AI trick, which is a marvelous shortcut for personalized topic generation.
Okay, walk us through the example for dealing with, say, parents or those repetitive acquaintances.
The example from the course was fantastic. A daughter was struggling to connect with her elderly parents in upstate New York. They just seemed to only talk about the weather and the grandkids in the most superficial way.
We've all been there.
So she typed into an AI, what do people who live in upstate New York in their 70s who have 9 grandchildren and are retired want me to ask them?
That's leveraging demographic and sociological data in a completely personal way. It's brilliant.
Isn't it? And the AI might come back with suggestions like, ask them about their favorite local historical landmark and why it matters to them. Or ask about the biggest change they've seen in their local community over the last decade.
Or something like, what's one piece of advice about raising kids they learned too late?
Exactly. These topics are novel, they're stimulating, and they immediately elevate the conversation out of that same old rut.
It just provides safer topics that are more likely to lead to mutual engagement. It lowers the entire cognitive load of that repetitive interaction.
It completely reframes it. You stop feeling frustrated by the repetition, and you start feeling curious about the specific history and the experiences of the person right in front of you.
Which is a perfect segue to our second pillar. A is for asking. Because if generating new, interesting things to say is cognitively taxing,
It is.
then asking questions is the ultimate conversational superpower.
It is the direct antidote to the problem of egocentrism and perspective-taking failure. Asking questions is the only guaranteed way to pull what's in another person's mind out and share it with you. It completely bypasses the mental gymnastics of trying to guess what they think or feel.
And the beauty of this is you don't have to be charismatic to do it well. You just need to be genuinely curious.
That genuine interest is the key. And the course illustrates this with this extreme exercise. They call it the never-ending follow-up questions exercise.
Okay.
It forces you to just drill down repeatedly, demonstrating that the depth of your follow-up matters way more than the genius of your opening question.
So if someone says they love to travel, instead of jumping in with your own travel stories, you ask.
You ask, what was the single most surprising thing you learned on your last trip? And then when they answer, you follow up again. Why was that surprising to you specifically?
You just keep pulling the thread.
You keep pulling the thread until you get to the meaning or the emotional core. And what's truly fascinating is that even when the other person knows you, you are intentionally using this follow-up technique.
They know it's a technique.
Even then, they still report feeling heard, feeling valued, and feeling incredibly interesting.
Why doesn't that manipulation, I guess, or the appearance of a technique spoil the connection?
Because genuine interest overrides technique. The simple act of dedicating continuous cognitive energy to their experience rather than just preparing your next speech is inherently validating. The technique is just a nudge, a nudge to do it a little bit better and overcome our own self-centeredness.
But let's address a common problem.
Yeah.
What happens when you get really good at asking questions, but the person across from you never returns the favor? The infamous ZQS, or zero questioner.
The ZQS is infuriating, whether it's on a first date or across a conference table. If you are relentlessly pouring energy into someone and they give you nothing back, that conversation is not co-constructed, it's being extracted from you. The example of the date that ended after 20 minutes because of the ZQS problem is so stark. If someone makes you feel irrelevant within 20 minutes, that says a lot about their level of sustained engagement.
So you can't force them to ask a question. What control do you actually have in that dynamic?
You control the topic. If you're dealing with a consistent zero questioner, try to shift the topic to an area of known, deep expertise for them. If you know they're an expert in Baroque art, you steer the conversation there.
Why does that work?
It encourages disclosure, and it might just trigger them to ask questions in an area where they feel authoritative and confident.
But we should pause here for the kind interpretation. We can't just assume the ZQS is always a narcissist. What are the other powerful psychological barriers that might be at play?
Right. There are 3 common fears that are often misplaced but incredibly powerful. First, egocentrism. They're genuinely too focused on dazzling you with their brilliance or just worrying about their own performance to even remember you exist. Second, fear of intrusion. They worry that asking about finances or family or personal goals is just too nosy or rude. They're paralyzed by the fear of crossing a boundary.
And the third?
Fear of incompetence. They fear looking foolish. They worry that if they ask a question about a topic they feel they should know, they'll expose a critical weakness. This is huge in professional settings.
That reframing is essential. So instead of immediately judging them as rude, you can test the theory. Are they just insecure, or are they truly disinterested?
And that determines your next move. If they're insecure, moving the topic to their area of expertise might help them feel safe enough to actually engage with you.
Okay, this is great. Now we move to the essential, yet so often overlooked component of dialogue. The framework is talk, but we really need to discuss the glue that holds TNA together.
Listening. Listening is the most cognitively demanding part of communication because, as we said earlier, the human resting state is just mind-wandering. To listen effectively, you have to continuously redirect your attention from your own thoughts to the other person.
And if you put in that effort,
you have to make sure the other person recognizes it. You need to get credit for listening.
How does the research break that down? Effective listening. It's more than just hearing the words, right?
It's a 3-step process. Step 1 is hearing and seeing. Absorbing the words, the tone, the nonverbal cues. Step 2 is elaborating, actively thinking about what you heard, connecting it to other things you know, processing the implication. And step 3, the crucial step, is showing back, explicitly demonstrating that you heard and thought about it. Without step 3, you're just an internal processor. You're not a conversational partner.
And this brings us to the distinction between active listening 101 and 201. What does that basic 101 listening look like?
101 is all nonverbal confirmation. You face the person, you maintain appropriate eye contact, you nod, you smile, you lean forward. These are basic signals of engagement.
Because if you're sitting sideways, scrolling on your phone,
they will assume you are not listening, even if you can theoretically parrot back their words. These cues just signal, I am mentally available for you.
And 201 moves us to the spoken aspect, the part that's much harder to fake.
Exactly. Using your words to show you heard requires actual cognitive processing. There are 2 key techniques here. First is grounding. This is the process of summarizing and verifying next steps. You say, okay, so what I heard you say is that the deliverable is due Tuesday, and my role is to secure the vendor contract. Is that correct?
So it checks for understanding and allows for instant repair if you got it wrong.
Instantly. The second technique, affirmation, is maybe even more powerful for building emotional connection.
Affirmation.
Affirmation validates the other person's reality. The power phrase here is, it makes sense that you would feel X about Y.
Can you give an example?
Sure. If a colleague is stressed about a presentation, you say, given how much preparation you've put in and the high visibility of this meeting, it makes sense that you feel anxious about the outcome.
So you're not agreeing with them or trying to solve their problem. You're just validating the legitimacy of their emotional response.
And that validation is the foundation of trust. People remember how you made them feel. And when you affirm their struggle, you demonstrate deep competence and care. Also, just paraphrasing and summarizing is excellent, especially in groups, because it shows you are following the whole complex discussion, which really enhances your authority.
Okay, so now that we've listened, processed, and responded, let's move to L is for levity. We need some sparkle and fizz, because while conflict is loud, boredom is the silent killer of conversation.
Boredom and disengagement are the true enemies of connection. Levity includes intentional moments of humor, of course, but also those unfunny moments of warmth.
Unfunny moments of warmth.
Yeah, a shared smile, an unexpected moment of playfulness. Levity acts as a re-engagement mechanism. It pulls our attention back when the cognitive load gets too high or the topic gets too heavy.
And we often talk about humor as a way to ease tension, but the research points to its use as a strategic tool, specifically through self-deprecation.
Yes, sharing failure, struggles, or personal shortcomings is highly effective, but, it's a big but, especially for people who already have high status.
So, senior leaders, visible experts.
Right. When a high-status person reveals a weakness, it signals, hey, I'm like you, I'm human. My success wasn't a straight line. It builds really rapid rapport.
But that strategy comes with a crucial caveat related to status risk, doesn't it?
It does. For people who are perceived as low status or are new to a group, self-deprecating humor or sharing failures is incredibly risky. They have a much narrower margin of error.
Why is that?
Because if a low-status person jokes about being incompetent, others might actually believe it. They might question their competence or their dedication. High-status people can afford that social risk. Low-status individuals often cannot.
So status is essentially a measure of social credit or risk tolerance. And we have to remember that status is highly contextual. It changes all the time.
That is the essential truth and the source of hope here. Status is not fixed. It changes from place to place, and most importantly, from topic to topic.
Right.
You might feel totally marginalized in a conversation about quantum physics. You're low status. But if the topic immediately shifts to a discussion of local school board policy, and you have years of lived experience volunteering in that domain.
You're suddenly the high-status expert.
Exactly.
So if you're in that moment of feeling marginalized, low status, invisible, lost in a technical discussion, is there a low-risk strategy to raise your status without having to reveal your ignorance?
Absolutely. The magic trick is to ask a clarifying question. If you don't know what's going on, chances are at least 3 other people in the room are equally lost.
So you're speaking for them.
You are in a privileged position to stop the momentum and say, hold on a second, can we just pause? You've lost me and probably some others. Can you please back up and define that specific term?
That's not a display of ignorance. It's a display of leadership. It shows confidence and a concern for the whole group's understanding.
It raises your authority instantly. You become the steward of clarity. And finally, on levity, we have to underscore the data. Humor is a core determinant of status. People are significantly more likely to vote for you as a leader or attribute competence to you if you make them laugh even once.
So humor is not a garnish.
It's a crucial tool for influence.
Which brings us to our final pillar. K is for kindness. Now, this sounds like a simple virtue, but in the context of the talk framework, it has to be effortful and constant.
Kindness in conversation is anything but passive. It's active work. And it has 2 main components. First, using respectful language, just avoiding language that hurts, excludes, or bullies. Second, responsive listening, putting in the visible, acknowledged effort to hear what the other person cares about and showing that you care.
So how do we apply this act of kindness with our colleagues?
You combine K with T topics. Instead of focusing only on task completion, you focus on what topics are valuable to them professionally or personally. You ask, what are you struggling with that I might genuinely be able to help you navigate?
Or, what success have you had recently that you haven't had a chance to properly celebrate?
Perfect. And with partners, which is arguably the hardest area because of our built-in egocentrism,
All right.
with partners, you have to relentlessly fight that self-centered focus. You must constantly try to predict What do they need right now? Do they need to vent, or do they need a solution? Do they need a hug, or do they need a cup of coffee and 20 minutes of quiet?
So kindness is meeting their need, even when it's inconvenient for your needs in that moment.
That's it, exactly.
What if that kindness has just evaporated and the communication is stuck in a toxic pattern, what the research calls the bad equilibrium, constant defensiveness, lashing out, accusations?
The bad equilibrium is a deep, deep rut. You both know the communication is unproductive, but you default to the worst habit every single time you see each other.
So how do you get out?
To get out, you need radical change, and it requires both parties to buy in. You can't do it alone.
So what's the concrete advice for starting that change?
First, a genuine apology for your part in creating the rut. Second, you propose a specific change in habit. You say, it seems like we've fallen into this terrible habit where we immediately get defensive and shout whenever we talk about money.
And then you propose the change.
What would it take for us to deliberately shift that pattern? Could we agree to take a 10-minute break anytime either one of us raises our voice?
So because conversation is co-constructed, you have to collaboratively agree on the new rules of engagement.
You have to. If one person refuses to buy into changing the habit, the equilibrium is likely to stay bad.
And that can be a sign of a bigger problem.
That is often the sign that the relationship in its current form is no longer serving either party. I mean, why remain locked in a communication pattern that is actively making you miserable?
Okay, let's move to navigating some of the most difficult high-stakes dynamics, starting with the one everyone struggles with: small talk. It feels so shallow, but the course says it's essential.
Small talk often feels like a necessary evil, but it is not evil. It's the social ritual. It's the warm-up, the pregame. It's where we exchange minimal risk information while we're searching for common ground. It just builds social lubrication before you get to the hard stuff.
And the research frames this using something called the topic pyramid. Walk us through those 3 levels.
Okay, so the bottom layer is small talk topics. The weather, the weekend, traffic, what you're eating. They require almost zero disclosure and are safe to talk about with anyone. You have the launch pad. The middle layer is tailored talk. This is where T&A really come in personalized topics that include disclosure, discussing their job challenges, their passions. This is where connection actually happens.
And the rare magical top layer.
That's deep talk. Highly personal, emotional, discussing core values, fears, or aspirations. And when you've hit deep talk, it feels intense and special. But critically, you have to recognize that deep talk is inappropriate for most contexts.
Right. You shouldn't be discussing your childhood trauma with the barista. So the trick then is moving quickly from small talk, layer 1, to tailored talk, layer 2. We need good launch pads.
Absolutely. Avoid questions that just invite one-word answers, like how was your day? Instead, use open-ended, slightly quirky questions that demand a bit of thought and disclosure.
Like what?
The course suggests questions like, what's one thing you're good at that you secretly hate doing? Or, what's a recent minor failure you're actually proud of?
Okay, let's walk through that good at hate doing launch pad.
Okay, so you ask a colleague that. They might reply, I'm extremely good at formatting spreadsheets, but it makes me feel like a machine and it just drains my soul.
Right.
You could immediately follow up, that sounds so frustrating. If you could delegate one thing today, what would it be? And boom, you have instantly moved from superficial small talk to a deeper discussion about job satisfaction, mental health, and delegation strategies.
That is really actionable. Now, let's tackle the most aggressive behavior. The dominator, the bulldozer, the Uncle Paulie, who just hogs the entire narrative in a group setting.
Bulldozing is maddening because it's so hard to challenge politely in front of other people. Since you have less control in a group, your strategy has to be to become the traffic director.
How do you direct that traffic verbally?
You have to interrupt politely, but firmly and deliberately redirect the attention. You physically turn toward the new person you want to speak, make eye contact, and verbally invite them in.
Give me the phrase.
That's a fascinating perspective, Paulie. Thank you for sharing. But Sarah, I wanted to circle back to that basketball team you're coaching. What were you telling us about their championship game?
You interrupt the pattern, you shift the topic, and you physically change the focus of the whole group.
Yes, and this requires the high-status people in the room, the leaders, to pay attention to their nonverbals, specifically equitable eye gaze. High-status people often gravitate to looking at other high-status people.
Right.
Leaders must deliberately make equitable eye contact with everyone in the room.
And why is that so crucial for the low-status members?
If you are low status and you feel invisible, Just seeing a leader deliberately make eye contact with you, even if they don't call on you, signals invitation and respect. It makes you feel seen. It drastically increases the chance that you will volunteer a thought later without the mortifying experience of being cold called. It's a subtle way to distribute influence.
Let's discuss interruptions, especially since research confirms that some groups, particularly women, are interrupted disproportionately. How do we draw the line between good and bad interruptions?
We have to differentiate first. On-topic interruptions, bubbling, finishing sentences, rapid, excited agreement, those are signs of high engagement and should be encouraged.
Okay.
The problem is off-topic interruptions. Someone cuts you off, clearly isn't listening, and just shifts the conversation entirely to their own agenda. That is a rude, devaluing, and disrespectful power play.
So how do you respond to that power play without escalating the whole thing?
Well, one strategy is to use levity. A quick joke like, wow, you were excited to jump in there. Hold that thought. Let me just finish this one sentence. But if that feels too aggressive, especially in a professional setting, we turn to the work bestie strategy.
The power of collaborative conversational intervention.
Yes. You rehearse with a trusted colleague. You say, if George interrupts me during the presentation, I want you to step in. You pre-script their response, something like, hold on, George, I actually really want to hear what your name was just about to say about the budget.
So the intervention happens sincerely without forcing the victim to challenge the aggressor directly, which can be politically dangerous.
Exactly. It's a team sport.
Next, let's talk about belittlement. Those really painful comments about weight or job choices or relationship status that so often come from the people closest to us.
Belittlement hurts precisely because it targets the core of our identity and often comes from loved ones whose opinions we crave. The first thing to recognize is that the belittling comment is usually rooted in the other person's anxiety or their stress or their unmet needs. It's not actually a deep assessment of you.
And instead of falling into a defensive spiral, we can deploy the receptiveness recipe. This feels like a crucial skill set for any high-stakes conversation.
It is critical. The goal is to respond without escalation, using receptive language. The recipe has 4 parts. 1, acknowledgement. 2, affirmation. 3, dividing yourself into multiple parts using and also. And 4, avoiding escalation words like because or therefore.
Okay, let's use the example. Your parent says, I just don't understand why you can't meet a nice person and settle down.
You start with affirmation and acknowledgement, showing you process their intent. You say, I hear you expressing that you love me and you want me to be happy. That's the affirmation. And I understand why you feel a little stressed about my future.
And then you deploy the and also to introduce your competing truth.
Right. And also the shift. You can understand why that specific comment, when I'm already trying very hard, might not feel helpful or motivating to me right now.
So you're holding both truths, their love and the pain of their words, in the same breath.
Exactly. You avoid starting a debate on why they shouldn't feel that way, which would use escalation words like because. You just state your truth right alongside theirs.
That is incredibly empowering. You're asserting your boundary without invalidating their emotion.
And it allows you to protect yourself without making the other person immediately defensive, which makes future repair much more likely.
Finally, what if the dynamic has completely broken down into an argument where someone is yelling or overheated?
When someone is genuinely angry, the arousal response is physical. Their body is flooded with cortisol. It takes a minimum of 20 minutes for that arousal to subside. At that point, a productive conversation is impossible. You have to call a timeout.
You have to step away and change the situation.
You can assert your boundary calmly. I'm happy to talk to you about this, but I'm not going to do it when you are using this tone of voice.
Or, let's take a break. I'm going for a walk, and we will circle back to this specific topic when we are both calm.
So change the environment.
Change the environment. Move rooms. Go outside. Physically disrupting the situation helps disrupt the emotional cycle.
If we leave the listener with one key mindset shift that kind of encapsulates the entire talk framework, what should that underlying truth be?
The key to being a good conversationalist is not about being interesting. It's about being interested. If you enter a conversation thinking, I need to be funny, I need to share a dazzling story, you put immense pressure on yourself and you just lean right into egocentrism. If, however, you view the other person as an endless font of things to be discovered,
I love that phrase.
then all you have to do is be curious and ask questions. Every single person on Earth has lived experiences you can learn from.
That completely changes the goal from performance anxiety to genuine discovery. It connects T, topics, and A, asking perfectly. You're constantly searching for their unique subject matter.
Which brings us to the final impossible coordination decision, ending the conversation gracefully. Why does the exit always feel so awkward?
It feels awkward because you can never achieve perfect coordination. You can't know when they want to be done.
Yeah.
And they can't know when you want to leave. So we just have to accept that awkwardness is the price of human interaction. We will never get the timing perfectly right.
So embrace the slight social friction and just keep the exit simple.
Yes. Avoid the long wind down. Just use a simple, appreciative exit. This was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed hearing about X. I look forward to our next talk. Bye. Keep it clear. Express gratitude.
If you could leave our listener with one single actionable takeaway from the talk framework that they should implement today to leverage this science of conversation, what would that one thing be?
It would be thinking ahead, that 30-second fix.
Just 30 seconds.
Prep topics. Even with the people you see every single day, your family, your spouse, your regular colleagues, it doesn't need to be written down. It could just be a mental note on your commute. That small effort of forethought changes the dialogue from a routine exchange into a productive, rewarding exploration.
That's a powerful and really accessible starting point.
And my parting thought is just about grace. Because we learn to talk as toddlers and we practice it constantly, we have this unfair expectation that we should be perfect communicators as adults. But honestly, when you analyze it closely, conversations are often a train wreck.
A train wreck.
We interrupt, we stumble, our ideas are half finished, we say things we don't mean. Just give yourself and others grace. Accept that you won't be perfect, and others will inevitably say things that upset you. Accepting this reality, which is born of love and human imperfection, is the best way to move forward, and ultimately to communicate good shorter.